You've got an episode coming up on the Buffalo Bills. I guess it just feels stale because they've had so much success over the past, 5 years. But you've got a video in the film room coming out about why this team should be, based on the metrics, better.
They absolutely should be. And I think that's, especially when people are trying to bet on the Bills, they're trying to figure out what's going wrong, right? Because they're looking at, metrics like EPA per play, which show like how healthy an offense is. They're second in that. They're third in play success rate. They're fifth in terms of offensive points scored. They're sixth in terms of touchdown drive percentage. And yet over the last 5 weeks, they're 18th in points per game. They've lost 3 out of 5. And, they have a negative point differential. So people are like, what's going on here? And so I did a lot of work on it, and I came up with a few different issues. The main one is that they're not getting field goals anymore. They're either turning the ball over or they're stalling out right on the edge of field goal range. And so they went from, in the first 4 weeks of the season, including that Jets game that was a terrible game, but in the first 4 weeks of the season, they had the highest percentage of their drives resulting in scores, whether touchdown or field goal. You go to the last 5 games, they're 21st, and they've dropped by over 25%. They're at about 31% because they either get touchdowns or they get nothing. They've only attempted 6 field goals in the last 5 games combined. They've only made 3 of them. And so the whole episode is basically like, okay, if we know the issue is that they're only getting 7s, but they're not getting any 3s to complement that, why are they stalling out? And there's a lot to it, but honestly, the main thing is play selection. Like, they stopped running the ball in the middle area of the field. And so they're constantly ending up in like 4th and 7 rather than 4th and 3. So the kind of go for it versus don't go for it conversation starts skewing towards punting rather than going for it and getting points. And I think if you just look at the 50 to the opposing 30-yard line, if they ran the ball a little bit more, they would be totally fine, and they probably would have won all 5 of those games. Instead, they lost 3 out of 5, and they're embarrassed.
Patrick, I love that breakdown. We saw it evident on Sunday night, Brett, against the Bengals. This team refused to run the football, and you saw them get into tough spots. Let's go a little bit to the other end of the extreme here in a team that will make you potentially hate football, the inconsistent Pittsburgh Steelers, who are sitting at 5-3. Brett, kind of take us through their offense and what deficiencies you're seeing with them.
Oh, man. Where do I even begin? A lot of it is they don't push the ball down the field on first down. They're kind of like the bizarro Bills where, the Bills they'll go down the field for any reason you give them, right? The Steelers don't do that. They do not push the ball more than 10 yards down the field on early downs. They basically treat their early down pass game like just a run with extra steps, right? So they'll get these 4- and 5-yard gains, or they'll get nothing, and they'll set up 2nd and long, and then they have a super high run rate on 2nd and long, which most great offenses don't do that because you're hoping for like 4 yards, right? So you're basically playing to get a 3rd and 3 rather than maybe a 1st and 10. And so they constantly end up in 3rd down, which they're not very good at regardless. And so then they, in terms of their drive success rate, they're at the very bottom of the league because they don't even try to get explosive plays, and the best offenses get explosive plays without throwing the ball down the field, without calling runs at the right time. It's just going to keep being like this, and you never really see the Steelers offense explode until the 4th quarter when Kenny Pickett just said, screw it, I'm just going to start throwing fades to George Pickens, but that's the only time they ever go down the field. It's just 3-quarters before then, and quite frankly, I'm not sure there's a way to fix this because the Steelers want to call their offense that way.
Yet they're 5-3. Tomlin is a wizard, and you had a video recently. Brett Kollman joining us, the film room here on Sharp Money. You said, look, C.J. Stroud is not normal. Offensive Rookie of the Year right now, DraftKings -500. He's going to win that award. It's been just a treat to watch this kid play.
Oh, and they've completely taken the training wheels off over the last week. Going into last week, they were the highest rate in terms of run, pass. And I know most football fans, they look at their offense and they hate when they go run, pass, right? Well, the Texans did that more than anybody else, even more than the Steelers. They were just better at it because C.J. Stroud's a lot better than Kenny Pickett. But when you go into the Bucs game, that was the first time all year where they were not heavily doing that kind of run, pass cadence. It was pass, more pass, keep passing. It was like 57 passes and 13 runs. Like they honestly looked like the Bills. And it was the first time they let C.J. Stroud operate the offense as if he was Josh Allen. And not going to lie, he did it better than Josh Allen has done it in any of their games this year. 470 yards, 5 touchdowns, no picks. He's accurate, he's efficient, and I think the Texans have finally realized that they don't need to protect him by just constantly running the ball into a brick wall. They can just let him be him and throw. And I think that's going to set up a wonderful game against the Bengals this week where, you're getting literally 2 of the 5 best quarterbacks in the AFC so far this year going toe-to-toe.
That should be a fun one to watch. I love this one you have on says how to legally cheat on every play. Give us a perspective on what options people have they may not be taking advantage of.
Oh, man, that one was all about the Juwan Taylor debacle early on in the year. It seems like it's been a long time since then. But, basically how, Juwan Taylor's not the only one who does it. Pretty much every single offensive line pushes the rules to get away with things. But how he kind of uses a loophole in false start rules to get away with quote-unquote early jumps. And it was explaining how the referees kind of interpret the false start rule and why they don't call him on false starts, while also kind of shining a light on what he does that actually is illegal, which is lining up too far behind the line of scrimmage. And I was kind of pointing out, how much he did that in that first game against Detroit and how, he got away with like 20-something penalties technically. And then, of course, the next week after Detroit complained about it, Juwan Taylor started getting called for that every single week. So I guess I kind of cursed him a little bit. But it was more kind of diving into the nitty-gritty of offensive line rules and how guys, Lane Johnson included, he does the same thing, how they kind of push the boundaries as much as possible to get away with stuff.
You can check the film room on YouTube. Make sure you check it out. It's great. Brett Kollman. Okay, let's get a play for tonight. Chicago's laying 3.5 and a total of 38.5. So a low total, no surprise in primetime on a short week. What do you got tonight with Carolina and Chicago here, Brett?
I'm really curious to see if, for the first time all year, Carolina can actually protect Bryce Young. If there was ever a pass rush they could do that against, it's Chicago. But their offensive line has just been a complete mess. Ike Ekwonu's taken a lot of steps from a very good rookie year that he had, honestly. Like he looked really, really good. And, physically, he's a monster. But his technique's a mess. He was getting run over by speed to power moves from Jonathan Grenard like 4 times in one game. His balance is off. His landmarks are off. His hands are off. Like everything's just off. And so he's been statistically one of the worst left tackles in the league, despite having a very strong rookie year. And so I kind of want to see if he bounces back tonight. Again, if there was an edge group that he could ever do that against, it's probably Chicago. But also, the rest of the Panthers' offensive line, like, can they keep Bryce Young upright for more than 2.5 seconds? And if so, how does Bryce then respond when he actually has time to throw? He doesn't have a whole lot of speed at receiver. He's kind of working with an elderly Adam Thielen as number 1 at this point. But if you can keep him protected, can Bryce Young look like the Bryce Young that we saw in college? And I have a soft spot for him. I've seen him live, even going back to when he was in high school. I saw him live, at Texas in that Bama-Texas game where, he came back in the last minute. Like, I know it's in there somewhere. If there was ever a game for him to get right, it's this one. And so that's kind of the main thing I'm paying attention to.
Yeah, the Bears, terrible pass D, lowest pressure rate in the NFL. You're right. Tonight is an opportunity for Bryce to get right against this Bears team. Brett Kollman, NFL film analyst, the Film Room on YouTube. You can also check out the podcast, the Bootleg Football Podcast, at Brett Kollman on Twitter as well. Thanks, Brett. Enjoy the football. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Go to VSiN.com/subscribe to become a VSiN Pro subscriber today.